Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we're going to hear a presentation from a student, right? Much like some of you. His name is Matt Bastos. I first met Matt Bastos as a freshman here at William Paterson University, actually a first semester freshman in my college writing classroom. Wow. And like many freshmen who come into my college writing classroom, maybe I shouldn't say this out loud, I don't really remember him from that time, right? Like many freshmen that come onto campus, I feel like he was still in that transition period, starting to try to find himself, right? And I feel like in some cases, he might have even struggled his way a little bit through that class. For some reason, he took me again the following semester for experiences in literature. I'm sure some of you are taking this class right now. It was in that class that I really started to see a voice emerge, right, within this young man. When he started writing about, believe it or not, film. I had no idea that he had a passion for film, that he had been interested in film for a long time before coming to this campus, or that he was even thinking about pursuing a major, right, in film. But once he was able to have the opportunity to write about stories like, what was it? Breaking Bad, and didn't you do also the Disney Puss in Boots or something? Yeah. The way that he handled the cinematography, right? And the choices that not only the writers and the directors made within those films, and how his presentation even on Walter White, that said that he didn't just break bad, right? Mm-hmm. He broke board. Provided such a stunning character analysis, not only in the paper, but in the presentation that he provided the class, that the class was more engaged, I think, probably than whenever I taught. Which probably isn't so much, so hard to believe. But Matt Bastos, I guess since leaving my class, right, has gone on to do a lot of things. He has directed and produced a movie called What Keeps Us Together, which was released in 2016 and won a Viewer's Choice Award at the WPU Film Festival, as well as the annual Maltese Award. He's also now an experienced cinematographer, and he's currently working with director Eric Almquist on the upcoming film The Great Unknown, which is currently in pre-production. Last semester, I had the pleasure of having him as a student, as a senior in my Critical Writing 1 class, where this idea sort of came up. He quickly became a class favorite on the blogs that we produced. And also when it came to peer review, it seemed like the students in the classroom would sort of get in line to get his feedback because he gave the most detailed responses, right? And the way that he approached his essay writing was completely influenced by his art as a filmmaker. He talked to the class about making, which I'm sure you're going to hear some of it today, about making certain types of cuts, changes in paragraph organization, and overall essay organization based on how scenes come in and out of being, right, when we're watching movies. So I hope that he puts on a pretty good presentation of that today because I've already seen him do it in classes prior. Backing him up is Professor Chris Williams, right, which I think some of you know. He's here in, is that fair to say, the film?
Yes,
film department, yep. Right?
Oh, communication, but I'm a film professor.
Communication, but he's a film professor. Received his MFA at New York University. He has worked with legendary director Spike Lee on the film Crooklyn. Right? He wrote, directed, and edited the feature film Asbury Park, which won the Gordon Parks Award for directing in 1997 and was selected for the 1990 Palm Springs Film Festival and the 1999 Atlanta Film Festival. Williams' short film Bloods on the Moon won the Time Warner and Warner Bros. Fellowship for Excellence in Filmmaking and the Dean's Choice Award at the NYU Film Festival in 1993. And his short film, Sucking Lemons, was the winner of the New Jersey Young Filmmakers Festival in 1989. So this person is extremely experienced and knows what he's talking about, right?
1989 was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. I don't want to say that I was 9.
Were you really?
I'm sure a lot of these people in the room weren't alive yet, right? Is that fair? All right. So I'm very glad that you guys came out for today. I think that you're in for a treat. And without further ado, I will give you Chris Williams, right, and Matt Bastos. Bastos.
There we go. Say thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for the intro. It's exciting to be here. I've been teaching here at William Paterson for 15 years. Is this where you say I was 9 when I started teaching here? I came here from Boston University. I was there for 3 years. But I look forward to, and I'm sorry, I always forget my the hell year teaching in Chicago at Columbia College. Some of you have heard me say that Chicago is a god-awful city. I wouldn't wish it upon anybody, and I tend to usually forget about my time there. So you want to know why Chicago is bad, right? You want to know? It's because the people are ugly. That's why, and it's cold. I'm going to be straight up. I'm not going to lie. The people are not good looking there. I like to be around fine, good looking people. So I worked very hard to come back to New Jersey. I spent 3 years, as I said, at Boston University, a good looking city. Very good looking city, but I couldn't wait to come back to New Jersey. And I was thrilled to come back to a state college because I went to Montclair State College. I grew up in Hackensack, so it was very exciting for me to come back to a state college so I could teach students who were like me, my wife, and all of my friends. When I look at my students and when I see them, I look around at people that I feel like I know. Every now and then I'll meet a student who'll come up and say, "You say you're from Hackensack?" And I go, "Yeah." "Do you know Chris Aiello?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I went to high school." "That's my aunt." And I'm like, "Really? Oh, that's exciting." Or they say it's my grandmother, and then I feel really old, but that's neither here nor there. But it's exciting for me to be here because I get to meet students like Matt. I often say that our students here, I've taught also at New York University at their film program, and I know quite a bit about the top film programs in the country in particular, and spent a lot of time at NYU and other programs, not just the film program. And one thing I've noticed, and I'm going to go off on a tangent here now, but I always mention this when I'm around students here, is that there's often an issue, not so much of racism or sexism or anything, but there's a sense of placism, right? The idea that if you only go to a state college, well, then you can only aspire to jobs and opportunity that are afforded to students who go to state colleges. In other words, if you're interested in graduate school, you would never think about going to Harvard or Yale or one of those other places. You would be content maybe to go to Rutgers, maybe Montclair State, or maybe here. And I often tell my students that that's not what they should be thinking of, that they should be thinking of and hoping to aspire to something greater. The fact that you're here and this is your place should not mean that this is your path. And when I was a student at Montclair State, I had a wonderful professor who saw my great film, Sucking Lemons, and it won this New Jersey Young Filmmakers Award, and he said, "You should apply to film school." And I said, "Well, I thought about it," and he said, "No, you should. Your work's good." It was the first anybody had really told me that, and I applied, and I didn't get in. And my professor couldn't understand why. He said, "I can't believe he didn't get in there." So he spoke with a couple of other professors, one of whom taught at NYU, spoke to somebody there, and said, "Can you take another look at him?" And then I was waitlisted, and I eventually got into the program there. And I excelled in that program there. And I think because I had a professor who said, "Why not try?" that was the thing that made me ultimately successful. And so I always like to say that to students here because at times you might not have a home life, you might not have friends, or anybody who's going to be there to support you. I was fortunate that I had Michael Saporin, who was this great professor who helped me. And I know I tried desperately, Matt can attest to this, to point out students and to point students in a particular way. This is placism. Again, this is this idea that this is where you have to be. Anyway, I always like to start with that because I always like you to think bigger and better. If you are interested, I'll tell you how to pay for grad schools because that usually comes up. But only suckers pay sticker. But that's another thing. We could talk about that. So that's me. I mentioned that I worked with Spike Lee. That was a thrill of my life because Spike was a big, huge influence on me and a lot of independent filmmakers, from Kevin Smith to Quentin Tarantino to Chris Nolan, who directed the Batman film. Spike Lee was really inspirational in that regard. And I was fortunate when I was at NYU as a teaching assistant, and it was announced that he was going to teach there. So all the teaching assistants, all the black students were brought up to the dean's office to announce, Spike was going to be there. So I was like, okay, I'm black, I'm sitting up there, Spike's going to be there, so I'm there, the dean was there. So she makes this announcement, and in this room, I raised my hand and I said, "Well, does Spike have a teaching assistant?" And she said, "Well, we haven't gotten there." And I said, "Well, he needs a teaching assistant. He's not going to schedule all his meetings with students and all of that stuff. I want to do it." And he goes, okay. And I said, no, I want to do this. I've been the teaching assistant the longest here. I'm black. Come on, how is this not gonna work? So anyway, I quickly became his teaching assistant, and that was a thrill. And then he asked me to work on his film Crooklyn, and my job was just literally to just be with him all the time and to videotape all the performances and such. And that really was a thrill. I also got a chance to work with Julie Taymor. Many of you, does anybody know Julie's name? You do? What has she done? She made a tiny, you do? Go ahead, who is she?
I know she directed
A tiny little thing.
yeah.
Well, a little independent thing that nobody's ever heard of. What? The Lion King on Broadway. That's right, the most profitable piece of entertainment ever. Julie Taymor directed it. She's one of the great American theater directors. So I was I worked in the casting department of a film she made for PBS, and it involved puppets. She works with puppetry a lot, so I had to be taught to use puppets. The Jim Henson studio was doing all the puppets. So my job was to go into the audition with actors and to manipulate the puppets with them as they acted with the puppets. And I got to sit in the room with her all the time, which was thrilling because Julie Taymor is a goddess. I mean, she literally is a genius. She won a MacArthur Genius Award. She's just this phenomenal woman. But she's very, very quiet, which is the opposite of Spike Lee. Spike Lee curses, yells, and screams and just kind of does this thing, whereas Julie is this quiet, cool. And this is where I get to say that I worked with Julie. I didn't know who she was, though, right? Because I didn't go to theater. But it was funny. Everybody's like, oh, Julie Taymor. And I'm like, yeah, Julie Taymor. And this was before, it's not like I could have went in the back on my phone and Googled it. There was no Google, right? You remember when you were young, if you didn't know anything, you literally had to fake it, right? Like, oh my God, yeah, can you believe that? Julie Taymor. I run home, who the F is Julie Taymor? I don't know who this woman is. And then she's like, you're Julie Taymor. I learned that she was a big deal. Anyway, but a lot of that comes from my uncle. My uncle was a music writer and producer. He was a producer of some of the early Jackson 5 songs, like I Want You Back and ABC. And so when I was a little kid growing up, my uncle, I would hear him on the radio all the time. I would hear his songs on the radio all the time. So that was really thrilling to me. So a lot of those songs certainly told stories. And storytelling generally informs our understanding of ourselves. For me, again, this begins with my Uncle Fred. He also wrote a tiny little song called I Will Survive, right? This is one of the classic disco songs, one of the classic songs ever made. And the first line of it is this, or the first stanza. At first I was afraid, I was petrified, kept thinking I could never live without you by my side. Then I spent so many nights just thinking how you did me wrong, and I grew strong, and I learned how to get along. Well, that's a story, right? That's a story. That's setting us up. That's going to set us up because later in the story she says, but now you're back. And she kind of takes on this role as using him being back as being that thing that's going to give her strength. And this song, of course, was used as a feminist manifesto at the time. The gay rights movement picked up on it. And then it simply became this thing where this refrain, this I will survive, I will survive, I will survive became that thing, where people just used it and kind of heard that as being the thing about it. But the whole song is literally her story about how she will survive. Now, I contrast that directly to one of my favorites, Kurt Cobain and Nirvana, right? This is my age when I grew up. I was in college during this time. Music has rhythm and melody. It also has lyrics, so the lyrics can tell a story. But the rhythm and melody can also be enough to carry us. It's been said, I believe Dave Grohl, who was the drummer in Nirvana, is now in Foo Fighters, he said that Kurt Cobain said to him that lyrics were unimportant. They were unimportant. That rhythm and melody meant everything. So I'm going to read to you lyrics to Smells Like Teen Spirit, their classic song. With the lights out, it's less dangerous. Here we are now, entertain us. I feel stupid and contagious. Here we are now, entertain us. A mulatto, an albino, a mosquito, my libido, yeah. Okay. It's not really telling you much, right? Not really telling you too much. But yet music has the rhythm and the melody to kind of keep us and allow us to kind of flow and understand what's happening. That's what music has. And the grunge music of that time had a certain amount of energy, and that's what people responded to. You listen to hip-hop in that same way. Hip-hop obviously has lyrics that you respond to, but I'm one of those people, I don't know lyrics, right? I know like every fifth word, so I'm like, house, brothers, car, that's me, I don't know the words. I just can't, there's too much going on, right? I'm a big fan of Chance the Rapper. I don't know what he's saying, right? I just don't know. But I know a couple of things, but I know as soon as I hear a groove, I'm like, okay, this is my jam, right? That's how it works, because it does something to me. So music has rhythm and melody. Film doesn't. Essay, writing, we don't have a rhythm and melody to hold on to. So the viewers have to rely upon what they're seeing or what they're reading to kind of get some information, particularly as it regards to the end or the climax of a story. The question always is, what are we being left with? At the end of a great song, you have the refrain. It goes on and on and on, and you like the music and you're being carried by it. A movie or reading something brings you through it and you're following it, but you don't know where it's going to end. But we expect something at the end. Again, that is the climax. But the climax doesn't have to be a big explosion or, forgive me, the death of Logan. It doesn't have to be something big like that. That was a spoiler alert. I should have. Sorry. Hey, go see the movie. It's been out 3 years. Let me tell you, Bruce Willis dead, okay? There, I said it. You don't know what that means, but when you see Sixth Sense, makes all the sense in the world. Yes, I spoiled it. The movie's been out 15 years. Forgive me. I spoiled. If it's out, I'm sorry. Logan's been out long enough, but that's just me. But sometimes a climax of a movie could be a single shot. The end of The Godfather is a classic example. It's just a door closing on a woman. I don't know how many of you read Color Purple. I mention this often. I'm not a big reader, but I remember reading that book. I was in my 20s. I remember reading through it. It's a beautiful book, flying through it. And I'm looking at, when is it going to end? And then eventually I realized the whole book comes together in the last page. The last page is that climax. But sometimes the climax doesn't have to be big. It just has to be satisfying. It could be as simple as click your heels together 3 times and repeat after me. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. It's no big explosion, no big nothing. But it's just something small, something satisfying. The basic framework for storytelling is somebody wants something and something's in their way. And will they overcome it or not? That's it. That's the framework of every story. It's as simple as that. We can add terms to it, so the someone who wants something, that's the protagonist. The thing that's opposing them, the something that's in the way, is the antagonist. Of course, we could look at the protagonist's journey, and we can look at the hero's journey. You can look at the Lord of the Rings journey, or even the journey in Star Wars of Luke Skywalker, the hero's journey as it takes this larger arc. But the basic framework of somebody wanting something and something in the way is the same. But storytelling really is leading someone through your version of events. I went to law school. I always wanted to go to law school. When I was a kid in high school, my mom went to Rutgers at night. And I remember I'd make dinner for her and she'd come home, she'd be tired. And I remember I always wanted to go to law school. I went to law school because I didn't want to turn 50 and hate teaching and hate my job. And I wanted to be able to just get up and do something else, right? So I went to law school. So I was working here full time and then going to school at night. So I have great empathy for students who are trying to balance all of that stuff because I spent 4 years doing that same thing. And it ain't easy, but of course, it is what it is. For me, of course, the joy of it was taking the LSATs and learning algebra over again, having to learn that again. But I did really well versus my SATs I'd rather not talk about. That's why I only talk about my LSATs. I did really well. My SATs, well, let's just say, yeah, I'm not talking about that. But But one thing I realized in or in law school was you have to brief cases, right? So you read a case and there's a sheet of paper. You're supposed to write down like a summary of the case. And there's a lot of reading, but I found it easy. In fact, I found that I could read, so long as I read all the cases, I could remember them because they were stories. That's all they were. They were just stories. And I was shocked at how similar this was to me loving films. I remember everything from films. I remember shots. I remember credits. I remember all of that stuff from films. So reading these cases, so long as I read all of the cases, I was able to follow it because they were all stories. They were all stories. I had a child custody case. I did some pro bono work for a domestic violence organization. And I had a child custody case that I had to argue in court. I also did some, like I said, for a domestic violence organization. So I would be in court representing women who've been abused, who have a restraining order, and they're seeking to get a final restraining order. So I'm the person who would be there in court to say, here are the reasons why this restraining order should be final. So I had this child custody case, and it was about this woman. She had a child, and the dad had left and stopped paying child support. Dad disappears for about 2 years. And suddenly he comes back in the kid's life. He now lives in Ohio. He's remarried, and he wants custody. He wants sole custody in Ohio. So I'm defending the woman who says, hell no. And this guy got a lawyer. The lawyer shows up at the school. The school releases the kid. This is a whole thing. So I get called in, and I quickly have to, learn everything about all the backstory and all the law and everything. But when we were in court, I realized that I had to present the story. And the story I used was very simple. And again, anytime you're doing anything, writing something, you're telling your version of events. So for me, was this a story about a guy who got his life together, is now living in Ohio and wants his child back? No, that works for him. My story was about this deadbeat dad who neglects his child for 2 years and now has the audacity to come back seeking custody. I needed to stress upon the judge that this is a guy who ultimately abandoned his child for 2 years, left mom to figure out how to raise him, and that it would be a disservice and unfair for the state of New Jersey to relinquish one of its citizens to the state of Ohio for this guy. That the state of New Jersey, again, it's mom, but I'm also putting it on the state, has to respect the fact that one of its citizens took care of one of her children, and we cannot have somebody who neglected a child for 2 years, who is a deadbeat dad, take a child. And I kept saying this, deadbeat dad, deadbeat dad, deadbeat dad. And the guy was on the phone. He was in Ohio. And at one point he interrupted and said, can you tell the lawyer to stop calling me a deadbeat dad? And that's when I knew I had him. And I said, well, you are. According to New Jersey statute of what the deadbeat dad is, you missed this number of child support. In the state of New Jersey, sir, you are a deadbeat dad. The deadbeat dad, deadbeat dad. So it's the judge who said, and we lost the case. So the kid goes to Ohio, right? And then, of course, I was angry. So we filed an appeal and wrote a brief about it. And the judge, it was overturned, and the court doesn't really do this to really chastise the judge for her decision in that. So I was very proud of that. But it was all about presenting that story. So first I had to present the story orally, and then I had to present my version of the story in a written form. So this bit of storytelling can move us from music that can tell us a story. But again, as I said, music has rhythm and melody to rely upon, but when it's just an individual watching a movie, reading something, we demand understanding, and we want something at the end. We want something at the end. So, as I said, I Will Survive has that I will survive at the end, over and over and over again. But in film, we don't have that opportunity. We just have to present our case and then have, hopefully, some bit of understanding as we get towards the end, towards the climax, and hope that it's satisfying, that you enjoy it. Matt can talk a little more about how we go about doing that specifically in film, but thank you for your time.
Okay, you guys hear me okay? Is this loud enough? Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for showing up. As a student, I've been here for 4 years. I'm graduating this May, and I know how terrible the walk from main campus is to here, especially if you've never been here before. So I really appreciate it. Just to go into who I am a little bit, I found a picture that I think summarizes me exactly who I am. That is me holding How the Grinch Stole Christmas on Blu-ray. It is a god-awful movie. I bought it for $9, but I love movies. If you guys know me at all, if you see me walk around here, you know that I'm either sitting around talking about movies, I'm talking about what movie came out, talking about what movies are coming out, talking about making movies. Ever since I was a young kid, I've been obsessed with movies. I've been obsessed with storytelling. I've been obsessed with the stories that inform things about our culture, things about who we are, things about what we believe in. I believe that everything that we live through in life informs our unique perspective of the life that we live through. I am the first generation kid of a Brazilian mother and a Portuguese man. Portuguese was my first language. I'm not great at it, but there's that. I grew up in a divorced home. My mom and my father split when I was young. I grew up with a little brother and an older sister. And I grew up watching my dad, talk to people and get remarried and have more kids. And I grew up watching my mom kind of struggle by herself and trying to keep everything going. And it's these kinds of things that we live through that affect every single thing that we believe in, affects everything, how we look at certain things in life, affects how we talk about what we talk about and the perspective we take when we see things. And so I'm telling you that so you guys understand, like I said before, I'm a student. I procrastinate. I was up till 3 a.m. finishing this presentation last night. I just discovered that Whose Line Is It Anyway came back like 3 years ago. So I've been watching clips for the last 3 days, not doing this. So I understand procrastination. I understand what's like being a student. Finals are terrible. You guys probably all just had your midterms, I'm guessing, right after before spring break. It's not fun. Coming back, it's not all that fun. And we have summer coming up, which is great. But I went through the whole motions of it. I know, I understand. And it's those unique perspectives that some of it we all share. We all share being students. We all share commute. Some of you guys probably dorm. We all share the experience of procrastination and having to go through work and each individual things we go through. So maybe some of you guys don't have certain perspectives of family and things that I share, but that's what makes your perspective unique. And I'm telling you this in a form of relatability, which I'm going to go into later. Now, why am I here? Meaning in this room, not in life, but why am I here? I don't know if you can read that. I had, as Professor Myers said, some of you guys are taking Professor Myers, I think, right? Some of you guys. I love this class. He was the first English professor I had here. I got a C in that first class. I was not happy about it. And then my most recent class, I got an A with him. And it was just learning my growth as a writer, learning who I am in my voice and where to get to. And at the end of the, at the end of our semester, we have these, meetings, one-on-one individual meetings with him. And he had us write a personal statement. And in my middle paragraph, as he was reading, I wrote, I think as a writer, my strengths are in personal type storytelling. I think with most of the films that I enjoy, I really connect with pieces that tell honest and relatable stories. I connect with the humanity of a piece of art, the core of what makes us all who we are, our deepest fears, thoughts, hopes, desires, and pains. These are the things I like to read about and watch. And in the same way, I think these are the things I really like to write about. I tend to think of everything in a very cinematic way. I view writing the same way I view storytelling through the media of film. I see breaks in paragraphs the same way I do as cuts in films. I obsess with the art of cinema just about every day, so it's hard for me not to relate it to other aspects of my creativity. Luckily for me, I think this really helps my writing. Now, this is not a normal kind of way people see things. And when I say, like, I relate everything to film, I honestly do. If I'm having, those late night one-on-one conversations with someone, we have no idea what either you're talking about, just really deep light conversations, I always relate it to, like, films and plots of movies, and they're asking, like, why do you do that? That's just how I think. I watch movies, I think too much, honestly. Last year, I went to the movie theaters 37 times. Many of which I've seen movies multiple times. When Star Wars The Force Awakens came out, I saw that 5 times in theaters. The first time, I cried approximately 5 times. I shook for the whole first 30 minutes. I love Star Wars. Star Wars is something that means so much to me. But it's just to show that when you're so ingrained with a certain medium of storytelling, you just, for some people, and I think especially for me, I hooked on so hard to it. And after Professor Myers read this, he asked me to give this workshop. I was absolutely terrified. I still am terrified, but nonetheless, we shall continue. Now, the big question on why we write and why we do things is why. And typically, when someone says, why are you doing this? I think most of our answers, it was assigned. I had assigned a paper, I was assigned a film, and that's why we do it. But I want to go a little deeper into the why did you write what you wrote about? Why did you talk what you talked about? Why was that your initial thought? I'm taking an acting class now with a professor named Jerry Beal, and he has us do different exercises and stuff. And sometimes we got to bring in our own characters we make up, our own people that we want to pretend to be for the entire class period. I came into class as my uncle. And he always asks, was that your first choice? And when people say no, he says usually because the first choice is the one that means the most to them, something that connects with them. So I'm going to talk about why we write what we write. I will make this quick, I apologize. So in Professor Meyer's critical writing class, we set up these blogs. There's groups of 3 or 4 students per blog. Each one had a theme. We had a theme of adventuring, we had a theme of social justice, and our group was called the Greater Scott, which is the play off of, Back to the Future and stuff. And we dealt with very personal subjects. At first, it became a thing of pop culture and how we relate to the things we believe in. But then it quickly became something else. We picked one-word themes every other week. We write about them. And then we had the topic of time. This came out very blurry, but I'm going to read through it quickly. It's called The Lack Of. I say, I seem to constantly try to find comfort in the reminders I tell myself. It's okay, you got time. Whether it is something as small as doing the quick take-home quiz in my environmental studies class, or procrastinating on editing a mini documentary for a client, the more I seem to think about how much time there is, the more I realize how quickly it goes by. This was written in November. I just spent the last hours trying to get tickets to Rogue One, a Star Wars story. In the last 60 minutes of stressful panic, time not only seemed to go by quickly, becoming a dramatic episode of me trying to navigate through the Fandango website that was crashing every 2 minutes because I was trying to get tickets. But time also seemed to slow down. Sorry, I lost myself. Slow down. I finally break through to a movie theater in time. I enter my debit card information. I press confirm my ticket purchase, and all of a sudden, time came to a halt. It's a stupid example, I know, but it's just a small reflection of a bigger picture. I certainly think the concept of time is according to how much of it I need and how much I'm not making use of. I can say there's a lot of time, and the more I seem to say it, the more time seems to be running away. That goes with procrastination. So the question that comes up is it time that's running away from me, or am I running away from time? Time moves on without my influence or decision-making. Moments will continue on as the hand on the clock completes its cycle. It's both infinite yet limited. I only have so much in an hour, and so many hours in a day, so many days in a week, months, years, and only so many years to live. And possibly, harder than that, is the limited time I had with other people. My grandmother was a strong woman. She raised my sister when my mom first had to come to America and try to make a life to bring her over here. My grandmother was the kind of woman that will make you eat a carrot every day just so you can have good eyesight growing up. It's so clear now that she wanted nothing more than the best for her family, at whatever cost. I used to see my grandmother every summer, until the year my parents got divorced. Money was tight. My mother had to start working to take care of me and my little brother. All of a sudden, we didn't have the time or money to visit as often. 7 years went by, and without fail, she would call me and wish me happy birthday and tell me how much she loved me and how much she wanted to see us. Every year we said, we're going to plan a trip for next year. We'll see you in the summer. We're coming. It seemed that as every year kind of passed by, we only believed more and more that we were going to go and see her in Brazil. June 7th, 2014, my grandmother passed away. I had not been to Brazil since I was a young kid, and my grandma never got to see me as a grown adult. Our excuse for not visiting was that we didn't have time, and now time ran out. This is when I realized that the overabundance of time is an illusion. It was actually a lack of time. In our blogs, we had to connect it to some sort of media, whether it was a video, a clip, a picture, an article, and I found myself on Forbes, which I know is a business site, but it's something, the 25 biggest regrets for life. What are yours? And people listed stuff such as not having enough confidence, not asking that boy or girl out, this and that. But the number one regret was working so much to the expense of family and friendships. And I ended this saying, I believe the key to using your time wisely is to not be afraid of it, not to waste it, and not to ignore it. Embrace time, embrace the times that feel slow, because looking back, they all feel so short. Now, this was an assignment. This was a bi-weekly blog post I did, but I wrote about it because after the death of my grandma, my perspective of time changed. I looked at time. Now, I still procrastinate like terribly. I told you, I was watching Who's Line. It's amazing. But I look at time differently. I look at time as something I need to be on top of because we lose things. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Now, we're going to talk about structure, specifically film structure. So some of you guys are film majors. Some of you guys know this. We got Act 1, the setup. That's where we meet our characters, our setting, etc. This is where we set up the world and the truth of that world. Act 2 is the conflict. This is where the meat of the story happens. Something happens, there's a confrontation, something goes on. This is where the moral of it all is. And there's Act 3, the resolution. Payoff, ending, closing, often reflection. We look back and see what we just went through. This is typical for a film structure, but I relate this in the same way I do to my writing. I'm going to go back to the essay I just read. So very first off, I tell you how bad I am at procrastinating and how much I love Star Wars and how I was freaking out trying to get tickets. That was my Act 1. That was my setup. I established relatability because I'm sure everyone knows what it's like to be a procrastinator, or everyone knows what it's like to, not everyone, but people know what it's like to like Star Wars. Relatability. Now, we're going to get to Act 2, conflict, confrontation. Now, oftentimes, since there's no real character in this. This is a story about me looking back and reflection. My confrontation was my realization of time. That was my conflict. That was the antagonist of my story. So all of this, talking about the stupid example, bigger picture, talking about my grandmother was a strong woman, this and that. That's the meat of the story. This is the why of why I wrote that story. You read this and you say, so this story seemed to be a thing about me being lazy, procrastinating, how we gotta fix it. But really, it's about me looking back saying, I miss my grandma. I miss the times I had with her, and now I lost that time. That's the answer to the why. Why did I write that? First, of course, I wrote because it was a sign, but I wrote that because I had something to say about time. I had something to say about the notion of missing someone. And this is my resolution. Now, often people think resolution means it has to be a happy ending, a tie on the bow, story's over. A lot of film fans in here, you know sometimes stories end open-ended. They end kind of not giving you that final answer. It's often a reflection of what you're looking back. This is me looking back thinking that all this time me and my family would say, no, we got time, we'll see her soon. When really, her time was running out, and now we're all out of the time we can share with her. This is my Act 3. This is me looking back at all that I was talking about. So that whole essay gave me my Act 1, 2, and 3. Same way I look at film, I look at my storytelling, whether it comes to essay writing, mind you. Now we're going to talk about editing. Most of you guys know editing is when you go film your movie, you bring it on a computer, you cut it up, put things in order, out of order, you match it up, you tell a story through that way. And often, editing, while just being very plain, people can say, it's the act of cutting the movie, a lot of edits have symbolism behind them. A lot of them have something that talks about the story, talks about the history of something. Has anyone here seen the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey? Anybody? Okay, 3 people. So it's one of Stanley Kubrick's greatest sci-fi films. It's like 3 hours long. It's absolutely insane. I barely get it, but it has this moment in the film, and mind you, it's not technically perfect, but the symbolism behind it. People call it the greatest cut in movie history. I'm going to show you guys that clip real quick. Okay, were you guys able to see that? Okay, is there a glare? Is there a bit of a glare? So it's a weird scene. It makes no sense. Well, it makes some sense, but so like I said, it wasn't technically perfect, but the theory behind this scene, the explanation is that we just saw the first instance of violence. An ape killed another ape. And at the end, to declare its victory, it's threw its bone in the air and the spinning, and then it match cuts to a shot of a space weapon. And the theory behind that is that in that shot, we skipped however many million years, and we showed the evolution of weaponry and violence. Now, just looking at it, it just looks like a normal cut. I know the first time I saw it, I just thought it was weird and kind of sloppily made, but looking back at it, Stanley Kubrick's one of those filmmakers who people can argue that nothing he did was by accident. Everything had his purpose to it. And so with that, talking about editing, I'll go back to this certain little cut. It's a very small point of it, but I just want to go back to it. When I shift from possibly more painful was the limited time I had with other people, and I cut to my grandmother was a strong woman. I'm cutting to a moment of, in my paper, self-reflection to the before I had that reflection. I'm cutting to the point which I'm talking about my grandmother, and now there's a shift in the tone. There's a shift in the story. It's talking about my grandmother and the fact that soon enough, whether or not at this point in the story, I knew I was going to lose her very, very soon. And so that's where I established my cuts. I cut from one tone theme to another in my writing. Same way how scenes cut, locations cut from scene to scene, location to location, themes to themes. This is where I consider a plot point. This is where my story changed, where it was very much about me, and it became about my grandma. Real quick, another thing that people consider very cinematic in film is motif. Motif in narratives, is any recurring element that has a symbolic significance in a story. So it's things that you see pop up multiple times in stories. Wes Anderson does this a lot with his films. There's a film called The Three Burials of Miguel Estrada, where there's TVs with static on them to symbolize certain things in the film. Has anyone here seen the movie Moonlight? 3 people, great. Great movie, it won Best Picture. There's a lot of visual symbolism in that film. I'm going to show you a quick clip of just someone edited the scenes that show symbolism. So a quick rundown of the film. It follows the story of this kid named Chiron in 3 points of his life. When he's a little kid, he's a teenager, and he's a grown man. And there's certain symbolism and visuals that are reoccurring all throughout different themes of his life. That's the clip. It's to show that there's a connection between all 3 stories. There's a motif going on. If you guys haven't seen Moonlight, I highly recommend it. It won Best Picture. Underdog film, I believe it was the best picture of the year, the most important picture. Definitely go out and see if you get a chance. I think it's on Blu-ray now. You can find it in whatever means you want to. I'm not going to read this whole thing. I wrote an essay in Professor Meyer's class called, it's a really stupid name, called Comfort in Chicago Deep Dish. I'm a drummer in a band. I'm in an alternative band called Sistine. And this is me writing about my experience on our first tour. We were going straight from New Jersey to Chicago, and everyone in the back of the van was asleep. I was awake, and I had a 4-hour driving shift. Didn't know how long I was driving for. Didn't know exactly where I was going. But I was, you guys know how when you have those late drives and you're just by yourself listening to music or something, you get really deep in your thoughts. You're just kind of thinking, and you think about everything that's going on in your life. This was me thinking about the terms of comfort and how sometimes where I'm most comfortable is in situations people find themselves in the least amount of comfort. We lived out of a van for the whole tour was about 2 weeks long, but we lived out of that van for 3 nights or so. 4 guys, very disgusting, very smelly. And in my writing, I started off being in the van. And I started off talking about me driving the van and the whole instance of I'm just driving, I don't know how long for, I'm just going straight. And multiple times throughout the essay, I cut back to time. I cut back between me thinking about my parents being back at home saying, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? You're just wasting money. It's not gonna happen. We almost went broke. Crazy situation, but I keep coming back to the thoughts of hearing my parents' voices in my head, and keep coming back to the time. I think my driving shift was ending at 6 a.m. and I had a 6-hour driving shift. So multiple times throughout the essay, I come back, snap out of my state of mind where I'm thinking about my life and what it means, what my parents would think. I cut back to me looking at the time saying, okay, I got 3 more hours of this episode, me thinking, me experiencing the situation. And that was just the use of motif. A motif is something I kept having the reoccurring thing of time. Saying before, my parents are respectively Brazilian and Portuguese, so growing up in a Portuguese-speaking household, they speak Portuguese to me. And multiple times I list the things that they would say, and they're always in Portuguese, because that's the way they talk to me. So that's how I hear their voice often. I hear them saying, like one of the lines here is my mother's almost daily reminder for saying, Mateus, talvez só pode ser professor tempo parcial. She's telling me, hey, this is great and all, you want to do music, you want to do film and touring and stuff, but you should get your degree so you can become a teacher part-time. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. And my dad's saying stuff like, how are you going to do this and make money? Like, this is not a career. And I'm saying, yeah, it's not a career. I know, but this is what I love to do. I'm comfortable. It's a passion. And that goes back to the why. Why do I do it? I do it because it's something that means to me. Even something that takes away money, which a lot of things in my life take away money, but it's something that you're passionate about. And it almost becomes, and it's not almost, it does becomes worth it. Money is fluid, but experiences, and these experiences, just lead into my perspective, these are important. I'm going to skip through this. I had another clip from Moonlight, but I'm going to skip it because it's not important. The evolution of writing. So often when we evolve as writers, we start off very, I don't want to say weak, we start off not knowing what our voice is, our specialty. Through my last 4 years of college, I learned that my specialty is personal type storytelling. I learned that I want to tell stories that mean something to me that hopefully will connect with someone else. And then by doing that, you usually start somewhere and the paper goes somewhere else. So, sorry. In film, we say the film gets written 3 times. Pre-production, which is the concept and screenplay. So the idea, me writing it on paper, that's the first time I write the movie. Then we go into production. We're actually filming. We're on set, we're shooting, we're running out of time, we're running out of money. So things are always getting moved and cut. That's the second time I write the film. Post-production. Bring it to editing, coloring, making fine adjustments. Oftentimes we go back and look at the first and second time we wrote the film and realize this is not working, we gotta change it up. And in the same way that a film gets written 3 times, I'm reaching for it, but I often say an essay also gets written 3 times. Usually we're assigned an essay or we want to go into some more sort of academic writing. We have an idea, and that's where we come up with our concept. Most of the time, professor will have you make an outline, and I think it helps, having points that you want to hit, you want to do. Then you go in the first draft. Professor Myers always says, for your first draft, it's messy, just write. Get it all out. Regurgitate everything you had to say. Put your ideas on paper. And then, so that's where I consider the production. Next is the post-production, which is the revisions, where we fine-tune the paper. This is when we start organizing things, moving them the way they need to be. Finding out where it needs to go to be properly told. And I have this saying that I kind of tell some people here at Hobart Hall and some professors, let it be what it wants to be. I have this thing where sometimes when I start writing a film, start writing a paper, start writing something, I have this something in mind, a goal that I know what it has to be. I know what I want to write about. And then as I'm writing it, let's say I'm writing a film with these certain characters, and I establish these characters' different truths, the things they believe in, things that they hope for, things that are in their way. And I establish their characteristics, what makes them unique. And all of a sudden I start writing, and the characters I created sort of dictate where the story's going, what they're going to say, how they're going to react. Same way with an essay. There's been many times, one of the blogs, we wrote an essay about the theme of justice. And I wrote it talking about this film that came out, The Birth of a Nation, the new one, and its comparison to the old one and how the purpose it was meant to be. And it started off as one thing. And then it slowly became this thing, this totally different thing that I wasn't originally intending. That's where the story needed to go. So often it's a very weird artsy-fartsy statement, but it's a thing where I think it's letting the narrative sort of take you where it needs to go. Because often as a writer, in my personal opinion, you have these perspectives and these, notices and these truths that you need to hit. But often where you started and where you're now at, it's a totally different place. And you have to be open to the concept of your film kind of taking you over rather than the vice versa. I believe in closing up soon. The last thing I gotta say is forget everything I just said. Not literally, but what I'm saying is everything I told you is in my own perspective. Like I mentioned before, everything I went through growing up, everything that I've written, every class I've taken, every music I played, everything I've listened to affects me in a certain way that makes me who I am and gives me my uniqueness as a writer. And I believe everyone else has that same characteristic about them. I don't know everyone's stories. Everyone has their own personal details of what makes them who they are. And this is just examples of how I view things. I hope that this gets you in a way of thinking about how you want to write. Maybe if you have certain passions in filmmaking, certain passions in writing, storytelling in general, that everything I said was meant to be a stepping stone, maybe to hopefully get you thinking about how you want to write your next thing, but that the way I do things is totally different than how you guys should do your own things. I'm going to close off with a quote by Sue Monk Kidd, the author of the book Secret Life of Bees. Stories have to be told or they die. And when they die, we can't remember who we are or why we're here. That's it. Thank you very much.
And we have a brief bit of time, not a lot for Q&A, but do any of you have any questions for Professor Chris Williams or Matt Bastos?
Thank you for sharing. I appreciate it.
There's a question.
Hi. So I just changed my major to print journalism, and I've been I want to transfer, but after seeing this presentation, I kind of want to stay here and get my degree here. But I just want your opinion on the whole program.
So when I first came, are you a freshman or for a second semester freshman? I'm guessing.
Yes.
When I first came here, if anyone has to leave, feel more than free. When I first came here, I absolutely hated the school. I wanted to leave. I wanted to leave my first 2 years, but it was a thing where as I slowly stayed and began to, because are you commuting or are you dorming?
I commute.
It's hard. It's hard as a commuter because you don't have time to make friends with a lot of people. The film program, film is so reliant on teamwork and relationship building. I'm finding in my last 2 years here, I've made so many great friends and so many close connections that now I wish I had another semester. So I think that college is what you make of it, but this is definitely a great program and great people involved.
I would encourage you to get involved. I often have to remind myself that when I'm upset with something, if I choose to leave and do something else, I'm still bringing me with me. And so no school you go to is going to come to you and rush to you and carry you on the, you have to be involved. And this university offers a lot. And the question is, are you going to put forth the effort? Commuting makes it harder, but many of our best students commute and they do very fine, get wonderful internships and great opportunity. But you have to make the commitment, and that's true if you go here or transfer somewhere else. But you do have to find a place you fit in. And if you ultimately determine that you don't fit in here, I would say there are lots of other colleges, and find a place that you do. But then take that moment and look at yourself and ask, did I do everything I could have done to give the school the chance?
Yeah, I also commute, and
Cool.
it sucks, but it's worth it.
It's not that bad. Thank you.
Thank you.